All right, hello everyone. Welcome back to another Stop and Chat here at Skeehan Studio. Today we're having an open conversation around the business of design and particularly the different business models and agreements that we have with our clients.
Yeah, should we start with how Skeehan is structured at the moment as a business?
Yeah, it's a good place to start, I guess. At the moment, it's definitely changing. It's evolving into more of a multi-leveled revenue kind of approach, where previously I had a lot of eggs in one basket, where we would supply product on a wholesale agreement, which not a lot of people knew about. We would actually design, manufacture and fulfill orders on product. That's awesome. I still love doing that. I think we're quite good at it. But in the last sort of 5 years, I've been trying to reprioritize the design service side of the business, where we're actually engaging with brands on more of a royalty agreement, where we'll develop the product and the IP, but then they're responsible for the manufacturing. So it's almost like 2 or 3 different pillars. Each of them are responsible for a significant amount of revenue that the studio brings in, but we're trying to actively grow some more than others.
Would you consider it like a lean business model? I know you've used that term before.
Yeah, definitely lean in every way, even if we are talking about design and manufacturing or just design services or design royalty.
And what's the benefit from that? Like, why have we changed from manufacturing everything to where we are now? Like, what made that change?
The biggest shift was probably just my personal goals and wanting to design more. Because we were responsible for designing and manufacturing, they can get a little bit heavy. And what I mean by heavy is it's just a bit slower and self-funded. So we're using our capital, our resources, and our network of manufacturers. And that's growing over the years, and our products are getting more complex and we're able to invest more money into them. But it might take a couple of years, and you only have a few options in terms of how many projects you can fund each year. Whereas if I can work with 5 brands in a year, each of them might have their own network of supply and manufacturing, as well as speed to market. They all might actually prioritize pushing each of them forward. Then as a designer, as a creative, I've been able to get 5 collections to market in a year rather than 1 self-funded.
Are we still considered like Australian manufacturers?
Absolutely, yeah. So as an Australian design studio, I think if we're designing into this country, it's important that we look at manufacturing here. Can it just make sense? It is a challenge, and one that I think a lot of Australian designers battle with, and we definitely have amazing relationships with companies and brands and manufacturers all around the world. And I'm not saying that we don't produce products outside of Australia. I just think that you need to work really hard to try and keep as much of that industry here.
What are some of the benefits from doing it offshore versus here, or vice versa?
I think the benefit to staying in Australia is often speed, so we can iterate quite quickly, and I can have a really nice intimate relationship with factories where I can visit them and spend time with them, and there's a great kind of feedback and dialogue there. There's also a bit of QC, and for a self-funded project, from my perspective, if I'm looking at MOQs or an early investment into a product, I find that sometimes the Australian manufacturers are a little bit more interested in dipping their toe in and just seeing how something will track, even if the price is inflated and it's going to cost a bit more. I think there's a lot of other benefits to sort of offset that risk.
And how did you find, I feel like it's a really common question of how do you find manufacturers, especially when you're starting out? Where do you get things made? So what was your journey finding who makes your stuff?
Yeah, that's an awesome question. Pardon me. We call it our black book here, and Ryan, who works at the studio, it's kind of been his job over the last 4 years is to really invest into our black book and build out that database. And these are just companies that we can rely on for different processes. And it just takes time. And often it's word of mouth marketing, essentially, where we're working with a company, they might refer a powder coater, and that powder coater might then go and refer a freight company. And equally, that freight company might talk about a particular caster or one that works really well on all their other products. So you're building out this sort of network of not only materials, but manufacturers that then you're just drawing on for whatever the product needs.
Yeah. And I guess for us, we were recently looking at getting some whiteboards made. And I remember it being something that we hadn't sort of gone into. And a lot of it was just a bit of research, to be honest. Like just going into the weeds, calling people up, figuring things out that way.
Definitely. I think that's sort of what we get paid to do, is to solve these problems and figure things out. And we shouldn't know it all at the moment. The whiteboard space was a really interesting sector because it was completely new for us. Although we'd been doing furniture for years, we hadn't done a product like that activity-based working, and one that required some really sort of specific functionality. So it was just that line of inquiry of going, okay, how do we become an expert very quickly in whiteboards? You know, who's already out there doing it really well? Where's the research, the data? Who are the manufacturers? And just book meetings, have conversations, read papers, and kind of learn that material quite quickly so that it can help you level up.
Yeah. And I guess you can also, if you find something like a product that you like or that you envision that you want to be pushing in towards, and use that as sort of a reference to then build back from that.
It's all out there, definitely.
Yeah.
So I'm not saying that we're doing anything particularly new in the material space. We're just building on what's already been established. So if there is a new anti-graffiti powder coating that is amazing in this space and hasn't been applied yet to whiteboards, that's actually an opportunity for us to discover that and connect those dots. But if you're not having open conversations with your powder coaters or with the MDF company that's pressing boards and laminates and who might be ultimately making your product, if you're not asking them these questions in a kind of a structured way, it's much harder to stumble across those answers.
Yeah. And so say you've found a manufacturer who you really like, how do you get in the door with them? Because there's got to be buy-in from both sides, I assume.
Definitely. It's a slow process, and you want to think of it like you're building a long-term relationship. Australian manufacturers, I think, feel a little bit beaten up, and that in the last 20 to 30 years, there's been a big shift, and we've taken a lot of stuff offshore. There's a lot less trades in some areas. Even in upholstery now, it's very difficult to get a trade specifically in upholstery. And I don't mean difficult to get a work placement. There are plenty of factories. It's actually really hard from the government side to get training and get support to even do the course and the certificate. So it's not really being prioritised there. And then outside of that, there is just this sort of influx of products being pushed offshore, you know, to some amazing factories, you know, that especially if we're looking in kind of Vietnam and in Indonesia and Japan and in China, they're awesome companies. They've got a good story, they produce amazing product. But if you're an Australian manufacturer, there might be second, third generation here, you know, that can be a big blow to your bottom line and pulling that industry out from underneath you. So they are a little bit reluctant, I think. They've heard it all before, and they hear all these stories about how we're going to sell so many units, and you know, they just kind of think it's bullshit. So it's about building that trust and go, okay, well, realistically, this is what I'm in for, this is what I need you for, what do you need from us? And I love almost auditing and kind of reflecting on a new manufacturer we're working with and go, well, how do you operate? What is your workflow? What equipment do you have? What's your capability in your team? Where do you want to take your company? And so if I can then design a product that fits their growth plan, then they're more likely to invest in it. And also then I know that they're going to be there in 3 years or 5 years once this product actually gets to market.
Yeah, because that's the other question I suppose I have, because I'm not in this part of the business whatsoever. But is there, I know that we hand over packages to our manufacturers, but does that shift quite a lot depending on who we're handing this over, and is it sort of a agreement of how they work, or?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's almost one of our studio superpowers, which we call Design for Manufacturing, DFM, and this is where we're really connected to the manufacturers and giving them a handover package, and we're in this open dialogue. And that's again because we have empathy for them and we understand how important they are in that process. Without them, the product wouldn't exist. So we need to get buy-in from the manufacturers early, which means we need to know their systems. Do they want production drawings? Do they prefer CAD? Do they like you to be in person at the factory walking through, or do they actually prefer a little bit of sort of space? All of these little subtle nuances, depending on the scale of the business, drastically influences, I think, the opportunity to get a product to market quickly in the way that you want.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, that was a lot on manufacturing.
That's good. I didn't know we're talking about manufacturing today.
No, neither. I just went for it. I wanted to talk a little bit about, I guess, so you've got your product, you've gotten it manufactured.
Yep.
I know then there's like IP,
Oh, cool. Yep.
so claiming that.
Yep.
Can you talk a little bit about that next process?
Yep. That's a massive can of worms that we're going to open up, and I'm happy to go into it and just let me know where we want to navigate through that. So around designing product and design registration and IP, there's some awesome shifts happening in Australia at the moment, headed up by IP Australia and the DIA and a few other kind of peak bodies that are looking to shift the IP laws in this country to better protect designers. So previously we sort of have this model where you're very limited in your protection for a product. If you show it on Instagram or if you share it at a trade fair, you're kind of voiding all of your opportunity to protect it later. And then the design registration process, although it's somewhat intuitive, there's still a cost there to register a product. Usually, let's say, under $300 to self-register. You do it all yourself, up to about $5,000 for a lawyer to potentially register it. But even that protection only really gives you 5 years plus 5 years. So that's the current state. But just recently, and this is very fresh, we're in a position now where we're getting like these grace periods introduced, where we're allowed to share the product online. We can test it at a trade fair, we can pitch it, we can put it on social media, gauge some interest in it. If there's enough groundswell, then you can go out and register that product. But the ultimate goal is to get us to a point where we've got this life plus life protection, where it's not just 5 years and then another 5 years. In my case, a product doesn't really hit its straps for 3 years. If it starts selling well, you want to be able to protect it for another 5 or 20. Yeah. So this life plus life model, which we're striving to kind of have baked into our legislation, allows us to protect the product for our lifetime and then renew it again.
Yeah, is that happening in other countries?
Yeah, that's right. It's quite common. Like in other countries that I think have a bigger emphasis on design, and what I mean by that, design makes up a bigger part of their GDP. So it's important for them to value design and protect designers and keep that in their country. I think in Australia, as a relatively new country that sort of doesn't have that similar connection to design, it's not a big part of our revenue from, if we think about the country collectively and design in education and the way that we think of prioritising the value in the discipline. I don't think it's baked in yet. Therefore, it's sort of not really reflected in our IP laws, and we're sort of regarded in Australia as the Wild West for IP protection. And I know a few other designers that will have their products registered, overseas, and they're quite comfortable with that process. And then they look into Australia and go, "Man, you guys just..." The way that we approach replica furniture, the way that we frame that conversation, which I kind of don't want to derail today's chat, but it's a bit disappointing, I think, the way that we look at design registration, IP and replica in this country.
Yeah, interesting. So then say we're not manufacturing our product ourselves, so you're talking about royalty agreements. How does that work? How do you negotiate that with a client? How does that conversation begin?
So it's all about leverage and your own interests. So what do you want? If you're an independent designer, or if you're starting a company, or even if you're a brand, what are your interests and what are you good at and what do you want to do? And what I mean by this is, if you want to be in control of the whole product and kind of own every single part of it, and there's lots of opportunity to then leverage potentially more margin because you're doing more of it, then get your hands involved in the manufacturing and try that out. But there is also a big part of our industry where designers are just not interested in manufacturing because we're not trained in it. We're industrial designers, we're architects, we're interior designers, we're product designers. That's what we do. Right? And then we partner with manufacturers and brands. So we're sort of like this piggy in the middle. That's a cool position to be in, but it means you then have to go out and find yourself some great partners to make sure that product goes to market. So in that case, what I'm doing is I might have a loose idea or a direction that I'm interested in taking the business. So let's say we want to focus on a folding chair. That's a sector that I think there's opportunity for growth in. There's few companies doing great products in that space. It interests me from an engineering perspective and an aesthetic perspective. So we will then actively go and look for companies that can either manufacture that product or sell that product. and look to do an agreement and a product development sort of process where we work in partnership. We take care of the design and development part, but they take care of that big heavy lifting, which is the development and to market and supply. So their buy-in comes a little bit later on, but they're paying for a huge part of the cost of the project. And then what we get at the end of it is a royalty agreement where for every unit sold, we get a percentage of that wholesale price. And there's so many different ways you can structure royalty agreements. I can break them down in a bit, but essentially we do a bit of work up front. We then hold their hand through the development process, hand it over to them. They drive it to market. And then our reward or our kicker is the ongoing sales for the life of the product.
What's the standard, if you don't mind me asking?
Yeah, no, that's what we're here for. Yeah. Again, this is back to leverage. So if you've got more leverage, you can ask for a higher percentage. So what I mean by leverage is, are you a more established designer? Have you already developed the product? Is it ready in the market? Is it already selling? Does it have a track record? What's the risk for the other party? If there's very little risk for them, you can negotiate a higher royalty. If you're relatively unknown, if you've taken a napkin sketch to them, and if you're relying on them to do a lot of that heavy lifting, then you're going to have less leverage to negotiate. But as a standard rule, I think a lot of people would come in or be happy to talk about a 5% royalty on wholesale. Now, this is where the shift happens, because great to go and negotiate 5%, but you really want to be talking first about volume, right? How much are we expecting to sell? How many markets does this distributor kind of have touch points into? And so if they've got high distribution, if they can sell into multiple countries, into, X amount of units projected, then you can negotiate a lower royalty, right? Because there's going to be volume there. Equally, if there is only, say, 50 units sold in a year and you're on a 4%, 3% royalty, or even higher, you're actually, like, your net amount that you're going to get is going to be a lot lower. So quite often the conversation gets too hyper-focused on the royalty amount, but not actually what are our targets? Even from just hypothetically, like, what does success look like for this product? What do we, sorry, there's a bit of background noise here. What do we want this product to achieve from our, not so much a revenue perspective, but just a unit sold? And from there we can kind of say, okay, well, based on that, I think we need a royalty agreement of this.
And you were saying that a royalty is on the wholesale price?
Yeah.
So
it depends. Yeah. So back to, again, this is back to leverage and just conversations with different brands. It's really important. I think it's really important to talk to a brand about their previous experiences with royalties and how do they have them structured, right? And then, so how is their business currently structured? Sorry guys, we just got, like, there's a lot happening here at the studio today, so whether you guys can hear it or not, there's a presentation going on downstairs. Okay, so to stay on track, okay, so the wholesale agreement is quite common because there's a kind of a fixed price there where the product is usually a defined wholesale amount. I've got royalty agreements on X factory, which means whatever the factory costs to produce that unit, you get paid. I've also got royalty agreements on retail.
Right.
So as you can imagine, the retail amount is a lot higher.
Yeah, but also fluctuating.
Fluctuates, which is interesting because if, say, we've got a royalty agreement on a table, but you do it in a really unique timber and they might do kind of a custom version, and then the sales team's able to sell that up because it's a great client. They've gone and gotten 20% more margin in their sales process because they're awesome, then we get a piece of that. Whereas if it's an ex-factory royalty, there's a unit price, that table might be $300 every single time, then that's our percentage, or that's our amount every time.
So how do you gauge what you'd prefer?
It's just an open conversation with the brand, and a lot of the time it's easier to measure the wholesale because it's a fixed kind of amount, and you don't have to get into, from a bookkeeping perspective, into the weeds on margins of like what is the true profit of that product, but also pardon me. To stay on track. Where were we, Kat? I'm totally derailed now. Where were we?
Just talking about royalties.
Yeah. Okay.
Hold on.
I wonder if we can cut this bit
I
out.
will be.
Okay, Fletcher.
Silence.
All right, let's keep going.
Okay, so you were saying, so you get paid once the product goes to market with that royalty.
Yep.
Do you get an upfront for that design?
Oh, cool.
Or how does
Yep.
that?
So a lot of the time I get asked these questions around upfront kind of fees or design fees, and then your royalty percentage, ongoing. Most projects that we're running actively now, they're a design fee, so we get paid a negotiated fee for doing the product kind of design and development, and we have a royalty on top of that. So this is all kind of factored into almost like a project price or a package price, where we're thinking about what's everyone's investment in this. How much risk am I going to take? Is it going to take me 6 months to develop this, and then I'm going to hand it over to you and you've changed your priorities, or you might go to market and it might tank, or you may not invest in the photo shoot or the catalogue. All of those things affect the opportunity for that product to do well. So that fee up front helps mitigate some of that risk from my side, gives me a bit of a buy-in from everybody and go, okay, great, we're all like excited about this, we're exchanging some kind of money. And then the kicker is if it does well, we're going to receive a royalty. And then you've got us on the hook essentially for the life of that product, where it's not like you just pay us for, say, a logo, hand it over, and you don't hear from us again. I think the nice thing about that royalty agreement is that there's incentive there for both companies to form a partnership so that you can then work together for the life of that product and keep iterating on it and refining it and repositioning it and making it better.
Yeah. Okay, so you've handed over a product to a client and then it's not selling well. Are you able to then take that to someone else, or do they own it now? How does that work?
Sometimes. Again, this just comes back to the subtleties of your agreement. Very early on in my career, I didn't put much emphasis on this part of it because I was just so excited to have a product go to market.
Yeah.
And for me, that was the win, is that I didn't even really care about the royalties. I just wanted it to exist. And for me, that was quite exciting just to see a product be manufactured by somebody else. But then all of a sudden, something may not perform, and a couple of years goes by, and it's not selling. It's sort of sitting there collecting dust, but it has potential. So what you want to try and do is get that product back and then reposition it maybe to another brand. You can do this by having some open conversations and saying, hey guys, this is sort of clearly not working. Can I have this back? But you can also build that into your royalty agreement. So when you're working with either your lawyer or with like a contract that you might have created yourself, they're the sort of things that you want to try and have in place as a designer to help protect you. So often we've sort of got certain targets that we want to hit and opportunities to review and renew. And so if things are going well, absolutely we can renew and you can kind of have that product for an extended license agreement. But if they're not, there's a get out clause. We can take that product back. Also, you want to be thinking about what if this company goes into liquidation, if they go under, does that go with them, or does that then revert back to me? Yeah.
And what about by country? Like, can you take something that someone owns in Australia to, say, the US, or how does that?
Yeah, again, it's back to that agreement. So we've got products that are sold here in Australia that we own, that are sold through distributors, that goes really well in Australia, but they're not interested in selling it into other countries. So then we go and find other brands in America or in Europe that could take that product on. So we've just started a new licensing agreement with our Nave collection with a company in the US. It's a great partnership because they're already manufacturing steel and they're great upholsterers, and so it made sense that we would give them a select number of products from our core range here in Australia.
Okay, so let's go back a little bit. So you've designed a product and you're looking for a company to take that from you and to get into a royalty agreement. What are some of those, I guess, questions that this client might have, or things that you should sort of come to the table with instead of just, say, a napkin sketch? What do you want to be presenting?
Yeah, cool. So this is about what you're trying to say. like what do you need to have to pitch in?
Yeah. Like how far down that rabbit hole
Yeah.
should you be going? Like should you find manufacturers? Should you be scoping up how much it's going to cost? All of those, like how far down do you want to get before you pitch to a client?
Back to leverage, because I think it's a nice way to frame it. It's quite common for designers to go to Milan Furniture Fair with, a book or a phone or a whole bunch of kind of presentations of products that they've designed and developed, and they book meetings with brands, and you pitch to them your product. And it might be a 3D printed model of a chair, it could be an iPad presentation, and you're showing them all of these designs with the hope that they would then go, oh, awesome, that one, I'll take it. And there's many designers, even in Australia, that's sort of like their model, and they'll go to the fair every year, they'll book their meetings, and that's how they kind of grow and pitch product. I do a little bit of that, and especially if I've got something that we might be working on here independently that I feel like would fit a certain company, then I'll reach out to them and be like, hi, can I have a meeting with the brand manager or the CEO or anyone who's in like a position of sort of influence and say, I'd like to show you some stuff and kind of talk about, this particular opportunity. There's a bit of a power shift there where you're coming to them just going like, hey, take this, do you want it? And then often they're like, no, we've got a big pipeline, we've got all these other kind of things going on. So you've got to muscle your way in a little bit. It also means you're doing a hell of a lot of work up front. Yeah. But at the same time, it's almost like pitching an EP or like you've got your music, you want people to hear it. You want to, early on in your career, you want to just be prolific and be making lots of things. And so you've got this portfolio of ideas, you want to share it. But for me, the best moments have been where a brand shows interest and you start asking some specific questions around, well, what do you need? Where are you taking the business? Where are some gaps in your portfolio? What can I be working on that allows me to give you a better result? Because then you're designing something that they truly need. Yeah. Right? And so many designers, I think, look at a brand that they want to work with that might have amazing wire chairs, and they're just this awesome company that's like has all these great products in this wire chair sector. So they go and pitch them another wire chair. Great, but I think they've got that category covered. Yeah. However, they've got a brand in that material, in that sector. You should be pitching them something else. But before you even go and start designing, what if you can have a meeting with them and ask them some questions around what they actually want? That way, if you are happy to work for free and do all of that development, at least it's a little bit more strategic.
Directed.
Yeah. And if you can, sorry to keep ranting, if you can, you want to then get an agreement. If you can, what you want to do is build a brief and a project and get paid up front. So ideally, you're going out and pitching your opportunity or services or value to a brand and going, hey, I'm a designer, this is what I can do, can we build a project together and you're going to pay me this amount up front and then we're going to go into a royalty agreement and I'm going to work on it for X amount of time and hand it over to you.
Yeah, I think it's good as well to come to the table wondering what are they looking for, what do they want. Yeah, I know you've spoken about like the product triangle, like brand, aesthetic, and then cost. So if you've kind of got those three covered, at least you're coming to the table with what they might be already looking for.
Definitely. And I'm trying not to position this chat too much around like super early career. Yeah. And I think early on, you're so hungry to get product into the market and you just want to see things exist, that you're more likely to design for free or they say jump, you say how high. And so you will hand over or try and present all of these different ideas. And it's this scattergun approach of just throw a bunch of things out there and see what sticks. As the studio's grown and as we have a team and kind of all these other expectations on the business to sort of make a profit and to cover wages and to keep growing, we can't be taking that many risks. We can't be having this sort of scattergun approach of like, okay, let's design 30 folding chairs and just go see which one lands. It's like, no, let's actually find a brand that wants a folding chair. Let's talk to them. Let's build a project out, put a fee proposal in, get the buy-in from everybody involved, and then collectively, we're going to design the best folding chair for them.
Yeah, and I guess we've done lots of projects with local restaurants and whatnot. And so that's sort of a way where you can build a product, but you're still getting paid for it. You can still pay your wages. And then you've got that to be able to pitch out to.
That's a cool one. Yeah. So what I get asked a little bit is, that's all fine, Tom, but I don't have any runway or I don't have any traction yet. No one is looking at me. And I feel it as well. I'm trying to work with bigger brands and different businesses that are in the next tier. As we grow, we want to kind of keep moving up in different categories. So those businesses that I'm pitching to now are equally looking at me going, okay, you're a bit too small. You know, they have the opportunity to work with any company in the world and have a big design development budget. So I'm trying to kind of pitch in to them. It's very similar to a smaller brand kind of coming in, like it's just these brackets.
Yeah.
Right? So what I had done in earlier years was use projects that are around us in our sphere. And what I mean by that, they're custom projects with architects and designers to help us test and level up and go through different development processes. So rather than me self-fund a folding chair, for example, a project might come our way for, let's say, hospitality venture with an architect where they're looking for something kind of specific. And normally we would say no to that because it's very heavy. It's a lot of work to design a whole kind of custom collection of furniture just for one project. But if there's a flip there, call it the flip, if there's a way to take all of that research and IP and learning and then grab that and kind of transfer that into the project that's that long burn, then that's quite strategic. So if we're looking at doing new sheet metal folding or steam bending or a process that is part of that flip, then we'll invest in it.
You're turning it into a case study.
Exactly.
Like proof that you are capable of doing those.
Exactly.
Process.
So then we use those custom projects that often just break even. They're difficult to make a profit on. And so you got to be careful not to do too many and you get sort of caught in this trap of just treading water. But it's a great way, I think, to present your brand or your design studio as someone who's doing something. And then through that, you'll also learn because you're partnering with manufacturers, getting something to market, even if it is just a custom table for a restaurant, is a huge amount of work.
Nice. Let me just see what else. Yep. I wanted to talk a little bit back on pricing. So you've talked about where you think in volume. So MOQs.
Yep.
How do you frame a product to a client? Say you've already got a product.
Yep.
And you're trying to frame that to a client, and you've talked about if you can think in volume, then it's a lot easier of a sell because it's going to be a lower, price per. Can you explain that a little bit? Yeah,
so this is where you're getting to that pointy end of pitching in on what your design fee might be or what your royalty might be. And quite often the product doesn't exist yet. And so it can be difficult for a client to justify that investment. Because there's a lot of stuff up in the air. There's a lot of promises and we will do this. What if we do this? So I like framing it as what we call bridge the gap. And so this is about understanding your client, or in this case the brand's desired reality. Where do they want to go to? Where a lot of the time they want to level up and be able to be perceived as, let's just say, into a new category, sell more for higher profit. That's where they want to be positioned. Awesome. Let's understand that. What does that look like for you? Where are you now? Right, this is where you are. You're talking to me. Where do you want to go? That's the huge gap between. And what we're going to do is we're going to help bridge that gap. We're going to get you there. So we're starting to look at, you're selling 100 units now. If we bridge this gap, you're going to be selling 500 units. That's our goal. And if you're doing 500 units, we're going to be doing it at a 40% margin. Or a 60% margin, because we're going to optimize our manufacturing. We're going to have great catalogs, a photo shoot, art direction. So we've shown them where we're going to take them. And if we can hit that, that's a success. We win because we get a royalty on that, right? And you win because it's your product and you've kind of taken your business from here to here.
So much about Skeehan is not just, handing over a finished design. It's all about how you can take a company from here to here and everything that's involved in that, and then pulling these different levers that we've got within our company to get it to that. Because I know that we're known as a design studio, and you assume that we just design the furniture but in order for that to be successful, we have to use all of these other avenues of our business.
And I think it just comes with maturity in the studio. It's now 10 years that we've been working with manufacturers and brands, and each year we're sort of slowly leveling up and doing more complex projects with bigger brands. And so along the way, you start to do different elements of a project, and I'm really enjoying a lot of that early strategy and product positioning and research, kind of understanding like where this product needs to be to succeed and who are we designing for. So that's almost a work block in itself, right? And if we look at our methodology and the way that we move through the design process, I think a lot of studios or independent designers, they skip a bit of that and they jump straight to the what it is.
Yeah.
And they start creating that chair, but not doing enough up front. So that's really fun. And the brands that we're working with now, they seem to just be getting it. Maybe it's the way that we sell it, but they're on board for that journey and they're happy to invest in it. And then those levers that you talk about, that's all those touch points at the end, like great product renders, awesome photo shoots and art directions. We're doing more brand positioning, catalogs, like working on trade fairs and how we launch a product. Stuff that years ago I would either just handball to somebody else, let the brand do it, and often that dictates the success of the product.
Yeah, so much of it is just learning through area. Like we've got to take some kind of control over that to push that product to where we want it to go.
And that's a slippery slope where, especially if you're on a royalty agreement, and this is why brands I think enjoy having designers on a buy-in on a royalty agreement, is that they're rewarded by the success of the product. And so when it goes to market, you're more likely to support them with an interesting art direction, product copy, naming, even going and attending launch events, all of these other things that normally you wouldn't be part of if you were just not partnered with them.
It's like the last 20%.
Yep.
Like you can't get it to 80%, have an amazing product and then not allow anyone to see it.
Exactly. And that happens a lot where things flop at that finish line. And we've got a collection at the moment which is sort of in that limbo, and it's a bit scary because I feel like we've got it really well positioned. The samples are amazing, the quality's great, the price point's great. I think it's some of our best work, but the company that we're working with, their goals are shifting. They're investing into other territories, and I can see that they're taking their company in a different direction. That's awesome for them. We've still got a great relationship, but that product that we were working on now sits in this limbo. Right? So what do we do with that? Can we bring it back? Can we reposition it? Or does it just have to disappear and we just use all of that learning and kind of understanding and start again?
Yeah, what can you get out of it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Where do you see Skeehan, like as a business model?
Yeah.
Where do you see that growing or changing over the next couple of years?
Yeah, we're looking at these pillars, which I was sort of trying to reference earlier, where we've got, I guess, 3 revenue streams that are pretty well established, and that is the royalty side, where we're just designing for brands and receiving a design fee and then a royalty. Then wholesale, so it's where we're designing our own IP, like our product just for us, that we own every little part of it, and then we're partnering with brands for distribution, and they're essentially just putting in purchase orders to us. And the last one is just this education kind of side, and that's sort of part of what we're doing here. They're the 3 pillars that the studio's built on in terms of revenue. I'm definitely prioritising a little bit more of the design for royalty side, just because the team's growing and we've got this awesome capability at the moment to do a whole lot of different things. And I think that's a nice way to flex a strong creative team, is that we can solve different problems. And I'm not saying that there's not room for that in our own product, but I think that's a slower burn where we're working on 2 collections at the moment that are just ours in-house. There's Skeehan house range, and we've been at them for almost 2 years, and it's this beautiful kind of slow burn. We've got samples coming in. We're going to start getting into the art direction now. That's awesome. On the service side, there's 15 clients floating there that all are different briefs. And some are really light and quick and we can turn around in a couple of months. Others are slow, kind of long projects. That's really exciting for me as a studio head, because I feel like we're into different markets, solving different problems, and I get to work with a really diverse team.
Yeah. So even though you're talking about all these diverse projects and that we've got team members who specialize in different areas, there's sort of this same methodology that we would apply to each of those projects. So a bit more of a consultancy where we take on a project, just like put the methodology through that. Can you explain a bit about that?
Yeah, that's, again, is part of this growth, is that we're understanding that there is a methodology for the way that we move through nearly all of our projects. And it doesn't matter how small it is, there's sort of these 4 steps and this sort of framework that we go through that is this sort of unique Skeehan methodology, I guess. But it's also something that's shared across a lot of the creative industries. Yeah. This is just the way that we've interpreted it. But now that we've started to work with so many different businesses and brands, that methodology is really getting, I think, quite refined and robust. And so what's interesting is seeing that applied just outside of my workflow and go, okay, it's not just up here anymore, and about how does Tom go through a product development, how do we as a team apply that? And how do we kind of take myself out of it and go, okay, here's the problem, this is what we're trying to solve or serve, and how we're going to move through it.
Yeah, I think often in the design industries you can get pigeonholed with one thing, and then you don't realise that that same framework can be applied to multiple avenues. Yeah. And I guess we sort of naturally found that through doing more art direction, whatever it was, all our different avenues, that you sort of realise that, okay, there is a methodology, there is the same process, I'm having the same sort of thinking processes through all of that.
Yeah, you've got to keep reflecting on that natural growth. And so, okay, what am I good at? Or what do I enjoy doing? What is my team good at? But then how do I monetize that? How do I build that back into the business model? And I still get lots of help. We've got a business coach and I've got mentors, and there's other studios that are twice the size of me that I just talk to the founders. We catch up and we talk about growing pains and pricing brackets and just how to position businesses. And a lot of it is about packaging up those other things that you're really good at and then selling it. And so if you are good at art direction, or if you do strategy on every project to get a good product, then find a way to package that up and sell it. Right? Present that into a client and just test it, pitch it in and go, okay, we have a strategy kind of discovery section here, and then here's the fee for it.
Yeah, like design thinking, we've run lots of, I guess, tutorials on design thinking, and that's the same sort of thing where we've figured out that, okay, we do these same exercises, okay, maybe other companies can use that within there. Yeah. And
I love that, because then we're zooming out a little bit and going, okay, we're not just a furniture design studio, and like that's our through thread, we want to be designing amazing furniture products, but we're applying this methodology, and there's a place for design thinking in furniture design, absolutely. But once you get good at design thinking for furniture, you can then zoom out a little bit and go, okay, well, let's apply this to this activity-based working sector where we're thinking about an architect and a developer and an end user, and we're using this process to help solve a completely different problem around occupancy, or how do we activate a floor plate or maximize a floor plate, which is connected to furniture but very loosely.
I want to talk a little bit about, because I feel like you've had a little bit of a light bulb moment that I've witnessed recently.
Not today.
Yeah. Where you sort of started, how you build teams is quite different than when I first started, where it's sort of this, I guess we've got this methodology, who are the best people to bring in on this specific project. Can you talk a little bit about how you've changed?
It's taken a really long time, and I think it's that natural growing pain of a founder starting off in a creative industry and doing all of the work, and then having to let go of different things and scale the business. And I'm still in this state of flux, and it's probably the thing I spend the most time on, is how do I scale this studio but still keep it at a level that I'm happy with. Like there's sort of a band that I want to be in, and how do I allow myself to be freed up enough to pursue other creative kind of opportunities and really look in on the business. That's the goal. It's been difficult, and one of the ways is really understanding yourself and what you're good at and what you're not good at, and building a team around you of that. And so there's clearly areas of business and even just the creative process and sales and marketing that I'm not as strong at or as interested in. So I very actively went out and tried to find people to fill those positions, And I've just invested in growing them as essentially as a pillar in the company that can just take care of those other parts, which means then it's this methodology or this kind of approach to team building where I'm really comfortable taking on really big, challenging problems because I'm comfortable in how I build a team, in how I go and find somebody and the way that we onboard and even find champions, these A players. And doesn't matter what the project is, we may not have the capability today, but if we get that project in, I can build a team around it. And that's kind of exciting because now we can almost just wind it up a bit and go, well, rather than previously I'd only go and hunt for work that I could do or that work that Tom and Catherine can do. So that's kind of limiting to the projects you can take on. And it's an uncomfortable space to be in when you go, well, I can't go do that project because I'm not an architect or I'm not an engineer or I'm not manufacturing in that country. That's just a problem. That's just something you need to overcome. And often building a good team around you, bringing in that right person, allows you to 10x and level up quite quickly.
Yeah, so at the end of the day, you're sort of like this just manager of
teams. You just build great teams. You know? And I think if you can think of it like that and go, cool, I've got an opportunity, who's my team? Even on a micro level, we do it like if there's an awesome branding agency right underneath us here at Skeehan Studio Inklab. We work with them with so many of our projects through to market, both at the beginning and at the end. So we're kind of positioned nicely in between. We'll grab them and bolt them in to our team. Also Vert Design in Sydney, and again, I don't need to get into the weeds of how we build a team, but it doesn't have to be an employee. You know, and as we're growing, more and more people are becoming full-time employees, I guess, that are part of that team. But it's almost project to project now, where we go, okay, we need capability into this area. Who is going to be part of that journey? Let's go talk to them, get a buy-in, almost like a joint venture where we all are on the one project.
That keeps it really lean, I suppose, as well, if you can just be sort of pulling in people when you need for specific projects. Yeah,
and that's, again, learning through failure and growing too quickly and hiring for the wrong reasons and going, I just need someone to do this task. Then you get them in, you get a seat, you get a workstation set up for them. What are they going to do for all of that other time? And is there enough work to support them? And are they good at all these other things? You know, they might be a specialist in this one area. And so having that mix of a generalist and specialist, you know, and who is that person, what's their responsibility, why are they been hired, that is sort of amplified if we've got a really challenging, hairy project where we need to build a new team.
Yeah. And you've also spoken with me about when you're building a team, it's not just necessarily what their CV is or their skills on paper are. It's also what they bring to a team, overall, the environment and whatnot.
Self-directed learning and your ability to be a team player, I prioritise that over so many other kind of skills. You know, portfolios are awesome and showing me how you will work, what you can do. It's how you think and how you fit in. We spend a lot of time here together, and so you need to fit into that dynamic. Right? And we're all unique personalities, and the work is hard and it's intense, and can be a stressful kind of place to work. But so can, even if it is highly charged and creative and exciting, that can be exhausting. Yeah, so you have to be able to fit into that dynamic. A lot of the other harder skills, they can be taught. I can level up those harder skills through coaching, through mentoring, through workshops, through software. Those softer skills about how to be a team player, how to self-directed learn, like to be actually involved in the growth of the business and care, it's hard to teach. I reckon that's it for us today for our stop and chat. It's been awesome to sit down here and just have a slow, open conversation kind of around the business of design. If there's anything that you guys would want to know more specifically, please feel free to send us a message on Instagram or YouTube. We'd love to kind of hear from you guys, and the whole point of these stop and chats is to connect with our creative community, but allow us to sort of talk out loud through our methodology and our process, and as we grow, kind of share that journey.